All right, people, season 3, episode 5 of Lost, The Cost of Living, our final episode for August, and our final episode of Lost, of our Talkin' Lost recap for the summer. The next time we come to you guys, I will be streaming live from Toronto, as well as we get fully into the fall. Our fall movie season today is also very important, as after this episode, after the conclusion of this episode, Luke and myself will be joined by Dustin, the Duster Mason, Jack Uffer, Mac of Mac Movie Reviews, and the first a newcomer to the channel for our first ever official fall movie draft. This is a fun little idea that I cooked up a while back. That is once again another idea that I notoriously ripped off from The Ringer, but who cares?
All the great writers steal ideas from each other.
Exactly. So why should the great podcasters as well? I'm so glad that you understand. But Luke, we are here to talk about. So is this like the apex of the first batch of season 3 episodes where it's like, okay, like we spent like the last two, like we spent enough time with Jack and Kate and Sawyer with the others. We're starting to make some progress there. We've reintroduced the plot of our main group of survivors and everything that's going on there. And now I feel like we've reached kind of like this apex point where it's kind of in a way like the last of the overhanging subplots that were left over from season 2 that's being resolved here, while also we're finally starting to make progress with the storylines, where the whole time we were wondering like, okay, the others, they're keeping Jack, Kate, and Sawyer captive. They're clearly like psychologically screwing with them in some capacity, as we know Ben Linus, but they're like, what are we really doing here? We had Sun accidentally draw first blood by shooting and killing Colleen when the others took Desmond's boat. And then we had Locke starting to craft his plan as far as like, okay, how we're going to get our group back from the other survivors. But of course, because of everything that we just went through in season 2, my only thought process with that whole side of things is, oh, now that Jack's out of the way, Locke finally sees his chance to enact his control over the others. And we saw a little bit of that when Locke is like, I'm going into the jungle and, anyone who wants to come can come. And Hurley's like, well, Jack never really told us. He kind of just, did his own thing silently. And he took Kate and Saeed usually, and Locke's like, well, I'm not Jack. So, you've got a little bit of that going on there. But the biggest and most important reason as to why this episode is so significant is because this is, and I did not tell you this as well, so I want to know how surprised you were when this happened. This is our goodbye to Echo episode, the final of the, like I said, that is the sad thing, is that of the 4 major tail end survivors that were introduced last season, only one of them survives to the end of the show. That, of course, being Bernard, who has not been seen since the SOS episode, where basically him and Rose are like, okay, we're no matter what happens, we're going to be living comfortably on the island for the rest of our lives. Because that was the decision that Rose made upon learning that the island had definitely healed her from her cancer. But Echo, unfortunately, meets his end in a rather brutal fashion. Famously, this was actually, for lack of a better word, there was a lot less controversy behind the scenes with this one than I originally thought, because obviously we know that Michelle Rodriguez and Cynthia Watros were fired after the DUI they got into while they were filming season 2. But season 3, famously, Adewale Akinye Agbaye requested that the writers write him off the show so that he could actually go to London and spend more time with his parents, because I believe they were both sick and ailing health. And then the only reason why he's famously the only Lost alumni cast member to not come back and make a cameo appearance for the final season. You'll see why once we get to it. And the reason for that being is because they just weren't able to reach a suitable salary negotiation. So that is that. Like I said, this is our goodbye to Echo episode. So what were your thoughts on that first and foremost? Because like I said, I didn't tell you that this was going to be the episode. I just said, I'm like, pay attention, because this is going to be an important episode for a reason.
Yeah, and like you mentioned at the beginning, this is sort of the conclusion of Act 1 of the season, if you will, because we had the sort of inciting events, or like Sun shooting, what's her name?
Colleen.
Not a very significant character, but so we had that. Then we had the Sawyer, Kate, Jack sort of set up, like Sawyer and Kate, they're in a cage. Jack, we know what Jack's big quandary is going to be for at least the next few episodes. And now we're set up with the other island, because we had the hatch explosion, the aftermath of that. We had the Locke episode where he smoked some ganja for in a tent and had some visions. So, and now we can actually get the ball rolling on the story. And as for Echo, I was watching and I'm like, oh, this is feeling kind of final. Like his whole inner conflict is like coming to a close, and then it's like, okay. And he's in Locke's arms, and he's like, "Oh, is he gonna make it?" But there's this facial expression on him. He's like, "No, this is pretty final." So, it was abrupt, but they tied it up very well.
Yes.
For what they had to work with. So So good on them for doing that.
And it's funny because it's once again another instance of where Lost this season has gone full meta. I feel like, especially with the Nikki and Paolo stuff, I'm like, may as well just be the writers being like, okay, we've heard your criticisms. Like, we get it. The other survivors, other than our main group, have kind of been left out. We're trying to include them more. We're making an effort. But this episode in particular, it felt like it was getting really meta with the whole like Locke sort of kind of being back to his old self, the wink, the twinkle in his eye, kind of being 2 steps ahead of everybody constantly, where once Echo wakes up from the tent where he's been since episode 3, since they rescued him from that very, very poor CGI polar bear scene with some of the worst cutting that I've ever seen in anything. They wake up, the tent's on fire. And then when they realize that Echo's gone and Charlie tells Locke, he's like, yeah, he was mumbling something about going to his brother. And that's when Locke immediately puts 2 and 2 together. He's like, don't worry. Like, Echo, we're going to meet up at some point, And also, it's like, I don't know, like Locke almost has this very knowing look on his face as far as what Echo's fate is going to be. And I don't know if that's because, again, he's back in touch with the island, or if it's because he just kind of has this. But again, Locke seems to have this understanding, this self-awareness as to what's going on with Echo in this episode, but also it's one of those things where it's like, we don't necessarily have time. Like, yeah, Echo's on his own solo vision quest, but unlike last season, the last 2 seasons where it felt like, characters would just randomly go off into the jungle, in order to go on their own, like, kind of character quest. This time, it's like, we kind of have more important things to do because we need to figure out how to save our friends to deal with the others. Now that the others have, like, announced themselves as this official threat and they have our friends, we got to make we got to set our priorities straight here. So Locke's whole thing is he's like, thanks to the information from Desmond, he's like, Desmond told me that the computer that blew up wasn't just for pushing the button and entering the code in order to waylay the electromagnetic energy. It also served a secondary function. It could also possibly communicate with other stations. Hence, Michael communicating with Walt last season. And obviously when Charlie rightfully brings up, well, didn't the hatch explode? And they're like, well, it did. That one did, but there are other stations. So obviously this leads them. They're going to go back to the Pearl, aka the question mark. And once they realize that Echo is going after his brother, after he wakes up, he sees another vision of Yemi, and that's his brother who died. And that's his whole bit. Is he's like, oh, you have to go and confess. Ultimately, you have to confess for your sins. And so they kind of find themselves on this converging path forward. Meanwhile, back on Hydra Island with Jack and the others, basically Jack talks to Ben, who, hasn't put on a robe, brings him to Colleen's funeral. And he's basically like, how you feeling, Ben? And Ben's like, what? He's like, well, considering if those pictures that I saw, if that's your spine, you got a tumor on your spine. And, unless those pictures were taken very recently, you're not going to be walking around for too much longer. So why am I here? So it's once again that little instance of Jack has figured it out. And now the chess match that has been going on between Jack, Kate, and Sawyer and the others, or in this case, really just Jack, has finally reached sort of a stalemate, because you just see the look on Ben's face when he talks to Juliet at the funeral. He's like, why did you tell Jack about my x-rays? She's like, I didn't. He figured it out, but it looks like you did. So there's a little bit of a back and forth there. So just your thoughts on those two kind of dueling plot. Like I said, there's a lot more going on in this episode than I originally remembered.
Yeah, so I guess the Hydra Island one, as we'll call it. Do we have a name for the other island? I'll call it the Prime Island.
Let's call it just Prime Island. But okay. There's a reason why this is called. Well, I call it Hydra Island because the Dharma facility that they're holding them in, I believe they said, was called the Hydra. So I'm like, it's easy to call it Hydra Island.
So it's, at least in this episode, we'll see how it goes going forward. But they're doing a pretty good balance of how interesting each plot line is, because the Prime Island one is more of an information plot, like understanding what the hatches are, like how can we communicate. There's a pirate in one of them, apparently. But I guess I am more invested in the Hydra Island one at this moment, because he had this big plan. He was gonna like befriend Jack, and then be like,
break him down. He's like, I wanted you to want to fix me, but the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it?
Yeah, and in a way that kind of humanizes Ben, because he's just been this absolute menace, like, ever since we met him. And like, also Jack's been wearing that sleeveless thing like for three seasons at this point, so it's nice to see him in something else for once.
Has he changed shirts once throughout this entire time?
No, it's always that gray sleeveless shirt. But yeah, I really enjoyed that dynamic, and that's gonna that it's a big decision for Jack coming up, as we learn later when he has a scene with Juliet. But yeah, I get it does make sense now. Now thinking back, like it was obviously gonna be Ben because there's no one else of the others significant enough to the plot where it would be like a big deal. So yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Where it's ultimately the result of the others were clearly now that we know kind of what the result of the others' game that they were playing with this one was. It's like, again, we know the others' tactics are, again, manipulation, psychological, breaking them down, bringing people onto their side. There's, obviously this has been hinted at throughout the course of it. We obviously, spent an entire half a season with Ben being held captive, but it was one of those back and forth cat and mouse things where it's like, oh, who was really in charge with him, constantly manipulating Locke to try and turn him against Jack and such. And then he even says it in this episode, again, once more with Lost's never-ending kind of battle of, oh, is this real? Are we in heaven? Are we in the Garden of Eden sort of thing of it's like, oh, it's like 2 days after I was diagnosed, a spinal surgeon fell out of the sky. So if that's not proof of God, then I don't know what is. So now, again, we know part of why the others were, why Ben was so intent. That ties back to that opening scene of this season where it's like, we know now why Ben was so intent. He's like, I want lists, part of, it within 3 days. Part of it obviously is, again, to fulfill the overall objective mission of the island. But now we know that there was a secondary, more selfish component, which is like, oh, see if there's a doctor that's capable of getting this thing out of me, this tumor out of me. And hey, now we have one. So that's kind of the solving of that plot line. And then meanwhile, with our main plot line as well, with Echo and Locke's kind of simultaneous quest. So with your mention as well, so they go back to the Pearl Station. It's Locke, Saeed, Desmond, and they bring Nikki and Paolo with them. And
it was almost the boys are back in town, but they brought the two others.
Yeah, the two randos, as I'm going to call them. Because right now they're just randos. It's like, oh, once again, it's like these random, really ridiculously attractive people who we didn't happen to notice before, and now we're randomly being given the spotlight. Again, it was part of their attempts to be like, okay, we're 2 seasons in, and we've only spent the majority of the time with these 14 survivors, 16 or 17, depending on if you count Rose and Bernard. It's like, why don't we try to include some of the other people, try to expand the cast members, and well, you're going to see where that one goes. But it's always really funny to me where it's like, oh, they were at least trying, at some point to make use of their ensemble. They make their way to the Pearl Station. They're trying to figure out how to communicate. Saeed's like, oh, this is a closed-off network. Nikki rightfully says, it's like, well, guys, there are TVs right there, right? And they're like, yeah. It's like, why don't you see if any one of those TVs and you said this is an observation station, right? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, why don't you see if you can connect to any of the other TVs and any of the other stations? See if we can see what's going on in them. And Locke's like, well, I feel like an idiot. So Saeed does exactly that. And they get an observation of one of the other stations. I don't remember which one, because I'm trying to remember how many stations did they say when Locke saw the map painting illuminated in lockdown last season?
It was like
7,
six.
Okay, so there's 6 other stations. So like I said, the Pearl blew up. Sorry, the Swan blew up. They're in the Pearl Station, which is the question mark. You have the Hydra Station on Hydra Islands. That's 3. So that leaves 3 more that we're going to see. So I forgot which one this is, but if it's the one that I'm thinking of, it'll be the one that we see in the season 3 finale. And like I said, we see a random dude with an eye patch. Who is that guy? We'll come to find out. I'll say that's a character that sort of plays an important role for the rest of the season. Is he one of the others? Is he a random Dharma member that's been stranded there? Who knows? We're going to find that out. Once again, classic Lost. Answers one mystery. We get 3 more. But then let's get to Echo. Let's wrap up with him. So like I said, Echo, this poor guy, again, he was ready to devote his life to the island. He's like, I have found my purpose. I'm going to sit at this chair. I'm going to input this code every 108 minutes. Oh no, Locke has decided that he doesn't believe in the island anymore. He shuts me out. He's going to let the thing blow up. Desmond realizes, thankfully, at the last minute, oh, thank God, everything that I was doing was real. Desmond manages to turn the key, let the energy out. So now no more hatch. Echo's blown to God only knows where. Trapped in some random polar bear cave. Locke rescues him to redeem himself, but now he's kind of on this solo vision quest to redeem himself, if you will, to confess everything. But it was one of those things where everything that we've learned about Echo up until this point was like, he wasn't really that bad of a guy, because going back to, again, the first thing that we saw in his flashback episode, which I believe was not the fire and water episode, I can't remember the 23rd Psalm episode from last season. Everything
the miracle girl episode.
No, that was the second one. The first one, the 23rd Psalm episode. It was right after the two groups collided. Where basically everything that Echo has done throughout the course of his life has been to help others. He joined the warlord gang in order to save his brother. He was trying to, he ultimately was trying to spare his brother. Yemi only died because he showed up to try and stop them. If he had never done that, he would have survived ultimately. And then obviously Echo is able to, Echo, after he is knocked out of the plane at the last minute by the smugglers, he is able to, pose as the new priest for the village. But the thing about the flashbacks in this episode is that they're very much like a conclusion. We're not getting anything new per se in this episode. It's kind of just filling in the gaps between the two flashback scenes that we saw in last season, where it picks up right after he got knocked out of the plane and he returns to the village, and he's approached by one of the villagers who asks if he's going to replace his brother. And so he becomes the new priest, only to discover that another group of warlords are showing up because they take a percentage of the vaccine that that the village receives every, 6 months, something like that. And so as a result, Echo is able to kind of use that to his advantage, where he is able to make it seem like, he's going to sell the vaccine for himself to another group so that he can get out of the country, so that the warlords will show up, so that he can kill them in order to protect the village. So in his mind, he's doing a good deed, but as the village woman tells him afterwards, all he's doing is just inviting more trouble on the village. So it's one of those things where this episode is, in its attempt to resolve kind of his storyline and his conflict, it's attempted to show how he's wondering if his atonement that is necessarily needed is a result of his own guilt over his actions, or is a result of kind of other actions that other people are prescribing onto him. Where when he finally has this moment to confess to Yemi, or again, this person who he thinks is Yemi, that's been haunting him this entire time, as I've said, like, any apparitions that are actually taking full-bodied are not apparitions at all, as we've seen, multiple different instances with multiple different characters throughout the episode. And there's also, again, this hint that, like, Echo is being haunted by something. We don't know what. Locke thinks he knows what it is. He's like, whatever it is that you think you saw, I saw it too. I saw a bright white light. And Echo's like, that is not what I saw at all, when they're uncovering the rocks. Because the whole thing is he's trying to find Yemi's body. He goes into the smuggler's plane. Yemi's body is gone. Next thing you know, Yemi starts showing up. He follows him into the jungle. He makes his confession, and he finally says, I'm not sorry for anything I did. Everything I did was for survival and self-preservation, but nothing that but also I did help people along the way, and it also ties into the reason as to why he was building the church as well last season, because he was like, I'm going to build a church in my brother's name. But then we have the twist that comes when basically his brother is like, you speak to me as if you're speaking to your brother. And then he's like, who are you? And that's our first major hint that it's like, this is not an apparition at all. Next thing you know, he follows him in. We get the black smoke monster. The black smoke monster gets him.
We haven't seen it in like
we haven't
a
seen
season
him in a while. But the other thing too, also that's of significant note, is this is the first time that we've seen someone come back face to face with the smoke monster and not come out alive. Because every person that's interacted with the smoke monster up until this point, and this could be a writing thing or this could be like a practical story thing, but every person that's interacted with the smoke monster up until this point has walked away unscathed. So do you think this is just a writer thing, or like, this is an easy way to write Echo off, or do you think there's some greater significance story-wise here?
I think maybe it's a bit of both, like as in a lot of cases, like yes, the request from the actor did play the major role, but then they thought, okay, can we use the smoke monster in a new way,
right,
with this impact? Because if I remember, like the previous smoke monster encounters, that most of the time it's been like more than one person. Like in the season 1 finale, like I think Kate got grabbed, and then the others had to
yes. Jack and Sawyer and them, and Locke and them had to grab her and save her. Yes.
Yeah. Still, what the smoke monster is, like, what was a security system, and whatever that means. It still sounds like it's made of gears to me. But yeah, it's clearly like this is not the island. The island is a good force, and the smoke monster is a clear an inhabitant of the island. It's
Yes.
not. It's an evil force.
An evil force, something that could be trapped there
Yeah.
per se, you know,
And
like that's what I've always wondered is like when Russo says it's a security system, it's like, what is she actually referring to? Because you notice how every time obviously you see the smoke monster come, it's accompanied by that noise, right? But the thing is, and this is the thing that I have not told you yet, the noise is not necessarily part of the smoke monster. It could be something else. So when Russo was referring to the security system, she may not have actually been referring to the smoke monster. It's again, it's funny how as we're getting further into the show and I'm remembering things that came up from this later point in the show, I'm like, oh, that's right. Like certain other things that are revealed throughout.
Yeah.
So,
but ultimately, Echo in his acceptance of his past and like, okay, I did not sin. I was doing everything for survival. That goes against what the smoke monster wants. So it repents and kills him eventually. So
yes,
just
exactly.
beating him to the ground, like it's a bit venomy, like a
Very much so.
like a long tendril.
Very
with,
much
with,
so.
a,
As
with a
we
very
know,
limited TV budget.
yes,
of
as we know,
2006.
Lindelof, a giant comic book fan, as we do know, he was in the writers' room and is credited as an executive producer for the upcoming Green Lantern show. So
yeah, as I said before, it's a little abrupt, but they wrapped it up as well as they could. So
yes, they did wrap it up nicely, and so that, like I said, that is it. We have our final goodbye to Echo, and he has his tearful reunion with his brother. Presumably, we don't know if that was a last flash before his eyes or if it was he was reuniting with Yemi in the afterlife, what have you. But this is a goodbye to Echo. You will be missed. Again, a short stay on the show, but a significant character nonetheless. And then we get our final wrap-up scene, which is back in the Hydra station after the whole hoorah, where Juliet is basically, she's under the pretense of like, oh, showing Jack a movie. She seems like she's trying to get Jack to convince Jack to operate on Ben, but really in reality, she's showing him a movie of her showing up signs of it's like Ben is a liar. He can't be trusted. She's like, you need to operate on him, but he needs to die during the procedure. Some of us want to change, but you're the only one who can kill him. And so now she's like, basically, you need to do this. It's the only way that your friends can escape. And so pulling off that little pretense. So what did you think of that scene ultimately?
I was waiting, like, okay, we got the Echo death, but there's gonna be like something else in the Hydra storyline. So yeah, Juliet does her Love Actually thing. Love Actually, what came out 3 years before this?
Just about, yeah.
Aired. So, but then she puts a movie on. She's saying one thing and showing another thing, and I'm just thinking, oh my god, Jack, what is going through his mind? And immediately I'm thinking like he's gonna save him. He's just a good person in general. Despite his many flaws, and two is just the Hippocratic oath, right? Like I don't think he'll be able to do that. And he's, of course we've seen that he's like the greatest surgeon ever.
Yeah,
so
much.
I think he's gonna almost do it, but then I think no, I'll save him, and then that will develop there, and that will create a whole new barrel of conflict. But then Ben will be grateful, and it's. I'm excited to see where it goes.
The possibilities have now become endless. Like I said, it's like, will Jack end up going Juliet's route, or will he save Ben's life? Tune in next time, because again, you also got to be assuming too. It's like, oh, now that I know that there are certain others that are kind of unsatisfied with Ben's way of running things. He's like, but I have the chance to save his life. He's like, that gives me a lot of power all of a sudden. So, like I said, Jack all of a sudden finds himself in a very, very fortuitous position in a way that he wasn't necessarily aware of beforehand. So, all that I'm going to say is if you guys want to see where this goes, tune in next time for next week's episode. Next week, like I said, we'll be getting into September. The 4 episodes that we'll be doing for the month of September, we have I Do, which is our next Kate episode. Then we have Not in Portland, which is going to be our first Juliet flashback. We're going to find out how she got to the island. Then after that is Flashes Before Your Eyes, which is our Desmond flashback. And then we end with Stranger in a Strange Land, which is infamously the most controversial Jack flashback. We'll be ending that September with that once we also hit one battle after another, the 10 Paul Thomas Anderson movies. So tune in.
Do we get another John Terry appearance in that?
We may not. All I'm going to say is I don't believe so. No, because if I'm remembering correctly, like I said, this is infamously Jack goes to Thailand in his flashbacks in that episode. And like I said, it was a very, very controversial flashback scene. And I believe that is the moment where Lindelof and Cuse were like, yeah, we we got to stop with these flashbacks. People are starting to get sick of this. So yeah, we tune in first of the month of September in order to see where things go after that. And also in the meantime, stay tuned because in about half an hour, we're going to be going live with our fall movie draft. That's right. This is going to be a barn burner. I've never done anything like this for the podcast, and it's going to be very interesting. So make sure you guys tune in. Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. But again, busy times. So this is my main presence. But we're almost coming up on a year of Talk with Lost. So we're almost halfway there in terms of episode numbers.
Yep.
I think
it's pretty.
Or we might even be. We're around there.
We're around there. It's getting to be around that point. Yeah. So, like I said, we'll be back shortly. Tune in for the fall movie draft. But in the meantime, get lost.